But when you get into kind of you start getting into a darker place, sometimes that's not that obvious. And I remember, well, what led me to kind of realize that I needed to do a little bit more than just kind of sucking it up and getting on with it was I would sit at my desk and cry before calls. And I'm like, this is not cool. Like, this is not who I am, right?
A growing health, wellness, and leadership podcast designed for you to become your most empowered self.
Great day, amazing humans. Welcome to the Empowered in My Skin podcast, where our mission is to help 1 billion people in this world think in more empowering ways. Empowered humans empower humans. So you are the right spot to become a lead domino for empowerment today. So let the show begin. Yes, great day, amazing humans, and hi YouTubers, and welcome to the next episode of Empowered My Skin. And as you know, because this is airing on a Monday, this is actually the last episode of our men's series, and so this is our 3rd year running, and so excited that I'm wrapping up with actually someone who I consider a mentor, definitely someone who's helped me out a lot in my career life and personal life too. So really excited to introduce you to our next guest and our final guest in our men's health series. He is a seasoned executive who has transformed his personal and professional life through resilience and a deep commitment to wellness. After a successful career in technology and business transformation, he faced a really profound turning point in 2022. I'm really excited to dive into that and really confronting mental health in a very unique and inspiring way, I'm going to say. His journey is marked by physical and emotional renewal, and it's included rebuilding his health through running. I think you picked that up in Italy, or if I read that quickly, like I had to. Anyway, I'll tell the peoples in a minute how this came to be. And fitness, yes, and reigniting your passion for travel and dedicating yourself to mindfulness and heart-centered leadership. But what I love is that it seems like from, maybe potentially victim to victor, you've now a certified heart math practitioner and wellness advocate, and you have this drive to really help teams and others thrive. And so you've emerged, you're merging now your executive experience with this life journey and insights from your personal transformation, and really now using it to serve and help others in the world. And I love that about you. And I think that that's really important. And in large part, the series that we're doing is about really double clicking on men's health. Sometimes it is the forgotten health amongst humans, right? Women are pretty good at it. Men tend to shy away from it. But I'm hoping that this conversation that I'm going to have with you is going to really continue to help really amplify that journey and that need for men. And so without further ado, all of my listeners, all of my YouTubers, put your ears, your hands, everything you've got together and give my next guest an amazing, gigantic, you know how to do it, Empowered in My Skin. Welcome to Paul Korber.
Well, this is awesome. Thanks, Nkechi. It's great to be with you, and I can hear all the applause.
Right? I just empower the humans to clap and pause and everything like that. I love it. And I thank you for saying yes. And so quickly, and I always say, your network is your net worth. Yeah. And one thing I've learned, and I often share in sort of my, the practices that I share as part of my thought leadership, that, networking is never about today. You network today for time in the future. And so to everyone the B-roll of all of this is, I had a guest who canceled, that I was scheduled to interview today. And their episode is supposed to air, and I need time to prepare it. And rather than panic, I was like, wait, I have a really great network. And who can I in this moment of need call on that I believe, one, is going to answer my call on a Saturday afternoon, and B, because they love me, say, yes, let's do this, girlfriend. And it was Paul. And exactly that happened. I love it. So I thank you so much. And And this is actually a year coming because you had shared very intimately with me that you had gone through, that you had gone through a journey with your mental health, and you were writing a book at the time, and I always knew that I wanted to pick your brain and really understand what that is, and so here we are.
Okay? Here we are. This is
so
great.
The first question I'm going to ask you is just the same question I ask all of my guests: is what is the most empowering thought that you've had for today so far?
Well, you know what? You just hit upon the network as being your net worth. I think that, and we'll cover this in the conversation, but often we're afraid to reach out to people, and especially we'll get into some of the mental health challenges and stuff that people go through, but we feel like we're alone. Yet when we do reach out, there's not anybody that said no, that they weren't willing to help, to talk,
right?
Right. And so that's that's a good starting point for this conversation for sure.
I love it, and hey, you're an example of that. So let's get right into it. I had the pleasure of leafing through. I have to read it back to front for sure, but really gleaned some insights from your book in terms of being prepared to have this conversation with you. So can you, I thought as the first question, the backstory always helps, right? But I've always seen you as this like top executive, doing your thing, sought after. And so I can't lie. When you told me that, I was really surprised. And sometimes I think we think the strongest amongst us can endure everything. And so can you maybe give people some backstories to who Paul is and sort of what you've achieved in your life, so they really kind of understand this?
Sure, and it's interesting. I think from my perspective, the story actually is telling when you get into things and look backwards and you kind of say, how did I get to this point? But yeah, I think where you and I met was working together at IBM, and I got brought in to firefight some pretty severe infrastructure problems, and became kind of known for that, right? Hey, there's a problem, there's a fire over here. Let's get Paul to come help us fix this. And that's how you earn your stripes and go forward. So I had a couple of companies before IBM. Then worked for about 10 years, I think, all told, with IBM as well. And then decided to move along, ended up over at Bell Canada, and, progressively more senior roles, got into product professional services, leading large programs, have a hair on the fire story of, we won't digress into it today, but, dealing with the federal government and a massive project that was out of control. So again, being put into the fire to kind of go put it out. Right. And so, I think that's, without getting into the specifics of, each job, that's been kind of my journey. And, we're sitting here 35 years into a career I've been blessed to have, and it's done very well for me and my family in the process. So yeah.
So very high performer, have achieved great heights. Probably have experiences that have actually helped you probably help others, right? And so, at what point in that story, in that journey that you're talking about, and I think it all culminated in 2022. Did you realize that you need help, and how did you take that first step to seek it? Because I think realizing is the first thing.
Yeah, it was not obvious. It took time to figure out that there was more going on than just the normal day stress. And we all go through it. We go through ups and we go through downs. And I'm sure, you and I've been on similar courses. Your listeners, your viewers have been taken different things around leadership, around personal resilience, those kinds of things. But when you get into you start getting into a darker place, sometimes that's not that obvious. And I remember, what led me to kind of realize that I needed to do a little bit more than just kind of sucking it up and getting on with it was, I would sit at my desk and cry before calls. And I'm like, this is not cool. Like, this is not who I am. Right. And, I was diagnosed, just a little bit of a fast forward, diagnosed with some depression issues. So when I was looking back at, kind of, you sit down with a counselor and you start going through kind of, dissecting what's really driving things. And fortunately, mine wasn't, I wasn't at a place of wanting to do self-harm. It's important to talk about these kinds of things, right? Because people have different degrees of depression and other conditions. But when I was looking at things, it was nobody knew at work that I was having a problem. My closest friends did. Certainly my wife did. My partner did. But we show what we want to show. My work performance was, I'm going to say this, my work performance sucked in my own mind, but in everybody else's mind is like, Paul's just doing his thing, right?
Yeah.
And so that one day where it was a couple of days leading into it, but crying before a call, it's like, I got to do something about this, right? And fortunately, working for a company that we have the employee assistance program, I reached out and then really started the help process for me, right? So.
And for someone like you, how did that experience feel? Like, was it mirrored with shame, or did you have any of that?
Yeah, I think so. And actually, I'm 2 years away, 2 years removed from that. I think I'm in a better place, but I still feel it. I still feel that, people talk about imposter syndrome and those kinds of things. It's a dark version of imposter syndrome, right? It's like, I don't belong here. A lot of different thinking, but shame was definitely one of them. The extension of that is that you feel like you're letting everybody down. You really need to focus on, you fixing your own self rather than worrying about somebody else. But that's how you hide it, right? You kind of say, a lot of in my career as well, as is team performance. Looking after the people that worked with me and for me is very important to me. And always had high performing teams and people that cared about each other and did good work. So I also felt guilty that I was letting them down, right? As I thought about, I had no choice but to push away, but felt very guilty about that.
But isn't it funny? Like, I always, like, as I listen to you, I also would say that chances are you have a lot in the bank account, right? Of not letting people down. That in those moments, you'd be surprised how many people want to help.
Absolutely.
You. Like, right? So you had some credit.
Yeah.
You had some credit to cash in.
Definitely that.
Credit to cash in.
Yeah. But it's interesting. I had a friend of mine, one of my colleagues, he lives out in St. John's, Newfoundland, and he and his wife had come in the summer of 22. They were in having a family vacation, so we got together and had dinner, and we had a really nice visit. But I was not myself. I was not who he was used to dealing with,
and he saw it.
He saw it, right? And then fast forward another year, we went out to St. John's to see them. And he's like, he could tell as soon as I got out of the car, he says, Paul's back.
Okay. So you never talked about it in that year? No.
So it's like, people know. They know. And I think what was really bizarre too is the organization I was part of, we did a lot of mental health training for the leadership team. And even when I was in the course, and I wasn't at this point suffering from depression, but you're going through the course and you're saying, but what does it look like?
Yes.
And they can't really answer you.
No.
Never really got an answer. And now through it, it's like, okay, you can't tell because they won't show you. Right?
Yeah. And I think there's a spectrum, right? I think, like you were alluding it to differently, I think everyone's journey is personal. And it's interesting because I've had a number of conversations, especially with this one incredible, he's written a book called Stigma Zero, and he's had both where he's had a brain injury, physical brain injury, and he's had mental health. And he talked about like the stark difference between how he dealt with it, for one, and two, how people dealt with him,
Right.
learning both, right? In one case, he got a lot of empathy and compassion. And in another case, he got fear and misunderstanding, right? And so, yeah, it's wild. So there's two things I want to ask you so the first one I want you to double click on therapy, because I think I'm big on therapy. I think I mean, if you start to think about like performance athletes, elite athletes and all this and the other, like these athletes have like shaved like a millisecond off of their time, which is the difference between gold and silver, right? At the end of the day, they're like, not only are they getting like the physical like coaching, but they're also getting the mental coaching. They're getting like therapy, like, because all of that is required in order to perform. It's no really different, in my opinion, in like even career life as a professional, right? Like in relationships, right? So I always say therapy before you need it can actually be very beneficial to its prevention almost, you know? Like, do you want to double click on that? All of that to say,
I couldn't agree more. And at the time, probably didn't recognize it. And even, think about your organizations with mentorships and those kinds of things. I never really embraced that kind of stuff. I was a mentor, but I never was a mentee. And so missed out probably in some of that guidance and career counseling and other things. Right. But yeah, I think the looking back on, like, ultimately, in order for me to get from where I was in my dark, alone place to being back and functioning and, back out trying to build a business and get back out get back out into the real world again. I ultimately had to build a team around me. And initially it was the counselor from EAP. I was fortunate enough to have enough sessions within that, and I nailed the person she was a perfect match for me.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask you. How do you know? Like, can you also talk to listeners about that?
Yeah, I'm sure if she didn't work out, I could ask for a different counselor.
Yeah.
But in the scenario that I got really, really, her name was Marcy. She's now since retired, so I've lost track of her. I don't know where she
hasn't read your ebook yet?
I don't think so. But she was a runner. And we got into, having just very simple conversations. And, like I mentioned earlier, like we've all been through certain levels of training and resiliency. And, we've got these techniques. And I said openly to her, I said, Marcy, I know exactly what I need to do, but I can't get off the couch to do it. And so she figured out the connection that she's a runner, and she knew I wanted to, I was missing running as an outlet. And she said, how about this? Just tomorrow morning, put on your running shoes. That's it. And she said, and the next day, put on your running shoes. And if you feel compelled, open the door.
So one foot in front of the other.
Right. So she started that process, and it was great. Very, very foundational for me to kind of come, clear the cobwebs and get out and be.
So before you go further, I want to actually ask you. So the next day you woke up, you did the work.
I did the work.
You put on your running shoes. Did you do anything beyond that?
I would say, initially, no. It took me probably a week of putting my shoes on to then go for a short walk, and I couldn't go to the corner. Wow. And then it just became longer and longer and longer, and then became sort of that outside fresh air, doing the things, letting your brain process, right? Getting out of the house and, getting off the couch because it's just way too comfortable getting out of bed, right?
And I like the reason I'm double clicking because and I appreciate you for allowing me to ask you, because it's not easy. I mean, I'm not trying to get you, but I just like, it's almost to help really break the stigma here, because you put on your running shoes, so your shoes are on, you could go running, but there's something that's physically preventing you from doing that. Like, if you can remember that first time, like, what's in your head telling Paul that you don't deserve to go running? Like, do you remember what that felt like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that the word I would probably use is fear.
Mm-hmm.
You've built a cocoon of safety
Mm-hmm.
that you need to break out of the cocoon, if you will, to
Mm-hmm.
kind of get back out. And because it's everybody's situation will be different, but I withdrew from everybody, even my family. Like I was just a lump on the couch watching TV and just kind of, very disengaged. And you've known me a long time. I'm not a
Mm-hmm.
disengaged person, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. When you told me, I was like,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would say in it's probably the easiest. I could get my emotion wheel out, and I could probably come up with a better word, but I would say probably very fearful, very self-conscious. You know, yeah, afraid's probably the
Mm,
biggest.
Lord. And before that time, how were you with talking about feelings? Like, really, like, were you good at that? Were you good at really, like, that self-awareness piece? Like, really
Um,
understanding who you were?
I'm gonna say yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you're talking about men's health. I mean, it's very stereotypical that it's suck it up, like just get on with it. What's your problem? It's a guy thing. Our fathers have taught us a certain way. Be tough, right? Crying's not allowed, right? So I think that, my mom did a good job of giving me an emotional base that my dad didn't, but
Mm-hmm.
didn't always embrace that side of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, so that's why I say yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
And often, it's probably just not just the men that you're talking to, and the women in the audience as well. Is like we do stuff at work, we suck it up, we put a face on,
Mm-hmm.
and then we come home and unload our emotions at home, right? Because
Yes. Yeah.
you let your hair down, you let your guard down, and it's like okay. And no different than our kids coming home from school, and they're on their best behavior at school, and
Mm-hmm.
then they come in, they freak out because there's
Mm-hmm.
whatever, right? So.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that that's where I would say the yes and no, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you put so much energy into making sure your teams are in good places, that there's wellness,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
balance, obviously the corporate performance that's expected
Mm-hmm.
from us.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I think that, I've certainly become significantly more aware
Mm-hmm.
of how I feel, developing and trying to find new techniques to help me manage those day to day, create a routine around it so that it's not, oh my goodness, I'm now in a dark place and I have to pull myself out. It's
Right.
the managing the self care going forward.
Right. Right. And now, like, I want to now sort of start to transition into the lesson and who you're now becoming, how that's improved your leadership. But before I do, there was something that you had mentioned before that like people at work didn't really know. You talked about your friend in Nova Scotia, like, a year later. So how much of when you were in your journey, did you dare to share with others? And sometimes I feel like when you think you're alone until you start to share. And then somebody says, oh my gosh, me too.
Mhm.
Yeah. Did you have that experience?
Um, Not initially. I would say it probably, the people that were closest to us. I didn't go looking for other people to share with. I mean, I think
Mhm.
it was the closer inner circle, family, close friends. To what, and depending on the recipient of that information dictates how much you share, right?
Mhm.
I think that, it's just the human relationship dynamic is, in some cases you're willing to share more than others. Some places you feel vulnerability is okay, and other places you don't. So
Mhm.
that's the degree to which,
Okay. Okay.
I tell this in my story in September of 22 when we went to Italy, and I don't know that my brother-in-law and sister-in-law were with us. And I
Mhm.
don't even know if they knew the extent of what I was going through, other than I
Mhm.
was struggling from work, and at that time have chosen not to go back, right? And
Yeah.
so, unless people ask, and this is another thing that's really, I think, important, for people to realize that it's not an imposition to ask how you're doing, and it's not an imposition to go one step deeper. So, hey, how you doing? If you know me and you would say, hey, Paul, how are you doing? You could tell if I'm doing well.
Really fine. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's the next question that I think is the most helpful. Can I help in any way? Or, I don't know what the right answer. Everybody's going to receive that question differently or perceive that question differently, but showing that you're an ally, showing that you're genuinely there for support. I mentioned it earlier. I wasn't in a harm place, which is I'm thankful for, but other people are, and that simple question could pull them back from the brink of,
that's right,
let me go get some help, as opposed to, I want to end my life, right?
That's right. And I don't know if it's the best question on the planet. It's inky. No, I'm just saying it's inky cheese question. I actually ask, and I've learned this through just experiences of friends going through grief, but I learned to ask, and people will see it. It's actually the first question I ask in my greetings is, how awesome are you doing today? Because the how are you doing is a very common question. Everybody asks it.
Right. So and you're programmed to answer it as
you're programmed to answer it, I'm fine. Right. Yeah. But if you change up the question, you're probably going to get, and more of a question around being very intentional about this moment. How are you doing in this moment? Right. How am I meeting you right now, today? Because sometimes I think it's important, because that could also shape the next thing that happens in that conversation. You might have just been going right into work, and that person is not even in a position or mental capacity to be able to, sort of take on whatever it is that you want to do. Anyway, so I try to ask a question that breaks the cycle of what typically people would ask, right?
Yeah. Well, I think I love when you call me because when we talk, because you ask me that, well, not necessarily, like variations of that. And what it does is wait a second, she's not asking me the normal question. Wait, I have to think about this. Wait a second. Because you really want to know, right? Yeah. But it's good because it jogs you out of that pattern,
right?
That pattern that we're all programmed into.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's now talk about, and I don't know where you are in your journey, so I don't want to, but it sounds like you've written a book. So you have said that I've gone through something, and I always like to say, like, I'm not saying you were in a mess, but I call it's like the message from the mess, right? Like right? And so first, before you get into like how you're helping others, how has your leadership been further influenced by this experience? Like, how do you feel you're showing up to life now?
Yeah, I think that I am pushing the envelope a little bit differently than I did. And what I mean by that is, like I haven't been back into a corporate setting. Well, actually, that's not true. I was in a corporate setting. I did a contract last year. And so a lot of the things that I've been doing is more one-on-one. But from that perspective, I think that my leadership, my personal leadership and how I lead myself has changed in that I've recognized that life is too short, that to be, one of the things that I've really, really worked on in the last couple of years is I've figured out that I'm a people pleaser, and that's part of the root of how I got myself into the scenario that I was in. And I've been working a lot on how to be happy with me. And so that by doing that, then I have a better objective view of what's going on around me. Is it satisfying Paul first versus, you get into these work scenarios and it's like you're on the treadmill and getting off the treadmill, right? So I think that's probably the biggest shift, other than getting kind of back into being Paul. I think that the biggest progression has been around recognizing that, and that doesn't mean I'm a dink, right?
Yes, yeah.
But it just means that I evaluate everything now. Is it for me?
Right? You're putting on your oxygen mask first.
Yeah.
that knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think in preparation for this, I let mention that, the journey has evolved substantially from the book, because my son and we earlier this year went to Africa to climb.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we went to climb Mount Kilimanjaro.
Oh, you did? When was that?
It was in February.
That must have been an incredible experience.
It was friggin' awesome. And where did that come from? It came from me trying to rebuild, and I was looking at successful people, and I kept finding these documentaries about people doing crazy things, and I'm like, what reasonable crazy thing could I do?
Yeah, climb a mountain, which is great. It's
climb a mountain. Yeah. And so, when you do those kinds of things and you really push the boundaries, what was interesting, you talked about they asked about my therapist. In terms of getting ready for Kilimanjaro, I had an executive coach on the business side, and I had a trainer as well to prep. And then unfortunately I had an injury, so I ended up with a physiotherapist. So I had a whole team of people getting me ready. And it's kind of a sharing. This is actually I think really important for people. Is about 2 weeks before we left, my injury wasn't recovered, but I was managing it, and I was losing it because I'm like, oh my God, am I going to get up this mountain? I was stressing out. I was having a complete meltdown. Okay. I called my coach, and he's like, Paul, settle down.
Yeah.
And he goes, what do you mean settle down? Like, it's kind of like your question of how you're doing, right? He's like, dude, what's your problem? And then he said, his name's Craig, and he said, look, he says, you've done absolutely everything you can to prepare for this trip.
Yeah.
He says, so what I want you to do between now and the time you get on the plane, he said, go back to the reasons why you're doing this. Mm-hmm. And it was like, well, okay, well, that's kind of weird advice, but okay, Craig, I'll go do that. And you know what? It was really important that I had done that, because it did two things. It allowed my son and I to have a conversation. It's contextualized, but hey, if we're on the mountain and something happens, when do one of us, if I get hurt, do you come with me, or do you?
Yeah. You keep
right?
going.
So we had that, but that allowed that conversation to happen. Mm-hmm. And then our summit night was a crazy night. Weather was terrible, and we had to make a decision whether we were going to continue to the summit or whether we were going to go back down. And to give some context, it was 35-mile-an-hour winds with 85-mile-an-hour gusts.
Jesus.
And our camp was flattened, right? So, we ultimately made the decision not to go. And my son said,
like everybody, because you're not climbing by yourself. There's a group.
No, we had a team. There was a team of 50 people supporting 14 guests, right? Okay. And all 14 of us said, no, we're not doing this. This is a very bad idea. Right decision to do that. But my son, after we made the decision, he said, Dad, I'm sorry. And because he knew that was part of the reason why I went. And I reflected instantly back to what Craig had asked me to do. Mm-hmm. And the why. And I said, dude, I'm okay with this decision. He said, well, what do you mean? You're pretty calm. And you know me, I'm not that calm a guy when things are not going right. And I said, look, I had 4 objectives to come. One was an adventure. One was with you. One was there was a particular part of the mountain that we climbed. It was my favorite day. Okay. And one was to summit. And I said, and then the 5th one was to get home safe. Yeah. So I said, I think I got 80% of what I came in. Yeah. I think I'm okay. It's all good. Right. So, I think that if you think about some of the things that I've learned and adjusted in my, because of my ordeal in 2022, just to internalize and start to look at framing and your why and those kinds of things has really become much more prevalent in the way that I approach things now than I probably ever did. Right? Yeah, it all starts with Simon Sinek. He's so right. It starts with why. Yep. And if you have a strong why, would you do it again? Yeah.
You would try to
Well,
get
there's an unchecked box there, right?
Yeah,
So,
I know, it's a summit, right? Yeah.
yeah, I would do it again. I'm looking at other challenges. The one that I've been researching the most is the Camino. So that's the pilgrimage across the top of Spain.
Okay.
So that one's probably when I formally retire, that's probably what I'll
That's
do.
the one you want to do? Yeah. I want to summit. I do want to climb a mountain, and I want to jump out of a plane.
That's fun. That's fun.
Oh, you've done that one.
I have done that one. Yeah.
Okay.
I highly recommend that one.
Yeah, I have to just muster up. It's just a little. I've talked about it so much, and I don't even like to talk about it anymore because I just want to do it and then share the experience. So.
Yep.
So let's talk about, as we start to wrap up here, let's talk about now this mission and how you are now leaning in to help executives, business owners, entrepreneurs really start to thrive more in their lives and what that looks like.
Yeah, and when you and I talked earlier today, I was like, I'm not sure have the total answer on this.
And you don't need it.
And
Right?
we're all on a journey, and I'm trying to figure that out. But when I look back at 35 years of experience, small business, large business, I think that there's some companies have it right, but most don't in the way that they actually look after their employees. And I won't go as far as say as corporations are broken, but some may say, I might wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say that maybe there's some things that they could be doing a little bit differently. I really felt that as much as the safety net was there for me to get support that I needed for my counseling and so forth, a lot of it felt like a checkbox. So
You're gonna kill me.
Oh, look at you.
No.
Well, they're going to kill you, yes, because your voice, your.
I'm like, I am so scared that this entire interview didn't pick up my voice.
Oh no.
I don't know what. And all my setup, I didn't pull my mic closer to my mouth. We're going.
Yeah.
We are going to hope
and pray that this actually.
Hope and pray, but the microphone was actually facing the other way anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, we'll see. Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. We might have to do that. We might have to do
this.
Okay.
Anyway.
Classic. But yeah, so what and this is one of the reasons why I took the HeartMath program and became a certified trainer. There is the program that I took, what is called Activating the Heart of Teams. And when I went through the course, it was interesting because it was as much for me as it was for anybody else that I could help. But what became really obvious was that things like meditation, things like all of these different techniques people are learning, HeartMath is put into a set of techniques you can go on the go with your eyes open and kind of just make sure that you're kind of in that heart-centered moment, or live your life from a heart-centered perspective, right? So again, just being centered. I won't get into all the details around that. That's a podcast for another day. But
it might be very soon. If my voice,
you never know. Pardon me. But yeah, so it really was all about, for me, how companies are always looking for their teams to perform better. They want numbers, more and more and more. But the people are getting more and more frazzled, more and more burnt out, more and more I'm done, right? And so this is a blend for me of how can I come in and give people resiliency techniques individually and as a team so that they can, be much more grounded, much more heart-centered and knock it out of the park of the eye, right? And then take those techniques home, right?
Right.
So that's kind of the thought process behind what's next, I think. And whether that's on an individual basis, whether that's, through some coaching, or whether that's working with companies and teams, And I thought I was pretty good at it when I was in the corporate space. But I think this is a cool dimension to add. And
I think so. And I would say, like, if you remember, well, if you didn't hear me, I said that you've been mentoring. I'm going to call you friend,
yep,
but I would say that you mentored me in my career. And so, and I think just this experience that you've gone through is just further enriching what has always been inside of you. So,
yeah, thank you. Yeah, it feels genuine and it feels correct, right?
yes,
So,
yeah, you are correct. I love you, Paul Korber. I've always loved you. And you've always been there for me. Like, even when I started this new role, and I remember I had all these massive problems to solve, and you've never, ever, not once picked up my call and been willing to help. Like, I'm just so blessed. And we met
seems like
2009, like 2009 to 2011 or so, And so, yeah, man. And it's interesting. I think I've also learned that, and it's hard. Like, I can say, check in on people more often, I may not have been able to help you, but I know I kind of thought about it. I was like, man, I wish I had actually thought to check in on you. I think we talked about it. I think we had a mutual friend, and that day I did actually call them to check in. Yeah. So it's important. It's important to remember.
It is, but at the same time, it's like life happens, right? And the next, it's like, wow, it's 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
You can think about it even with your close friends, like, I'm supposed to get together with for dinner, and it's like it's 3 months for me.
Right.
Months go by. It's like so. It's really, really easy to time gets away from us, and I guess that comes back to that living intentionally, right?
Yes.
For yourself, not in a selfish way, but living in the moment and being, not to get off into the heart centricity piece of it, but if you're leading from the heart, a lot of good things happen, right?
Yeah. So as a final question, and this being the last episode of the series, what are some of Paul's, again, these are Paul's magic moments or Paul magic habits, that, especially the men that are listening could take and implement immediately just to start to I loved how your Marcy, I'm going to call her your Marcy, really helped you one foot in front of the other. And so what are some of those daily things that, you think are winning habits?
Yeah, I think that probably so yes, I mean, obviously I live by putting on your shoes, right? Like that is kind of my mantra for everything now. It's, anything that you can think of, just that metaphor really is important. You got a pile of work to do, just do something, right? Like you can apply that metaphor to anything. I think, the thing that I've tried to embody every day is to give ourselves some grace. We're all driven people, whether, part of it's us, part of it's the society we live in, part of it's the companies we work for, trying to do better for our families. And we forget that, we need to have some of that self-love, if you will, and give ourselves some permission sometimes to just chill, right? And just give yourself a break. That's probably number 2 on the list for me. I don't know. There's probably a dozen other things that come up in and out. Those are probably the 2 things.
I think grace is important.
We can be so hard on ourselves, right? And like, we're both in technology, come from technology backgrounds, and think about, and a lot of businesses are like this. We're always focused on the last 0.5%. So we're focused on the negative, but we don't look at the 99.9% of everything else that's going great.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's giving ourselves some perspective. It's giving that. And I think that like I said, the one of the things that I'm learning, it's not everybody's personality this way is, but I'm trying to please Paul before I please others.
Yeah. It's important. Basic. Oxygen mask.
I love that analogy. Yeah.
I do it all the time. I'm like, people don't know 4:10 a.m. in the morning till 8 a.m. in the morning is like, and then again in the evening, I shut down at 7:30. It's like very, very, very small percentage of people can break through Fort Knox at 7:30 p.m. But 4:10 a.m. to 8 a.m. is because the majority of the world is not up, at least in my hemisphere. Yeah. And I use that time to that's my self-care. That's my time. Yeah, my time.
Yeah, so important.
So Paul, thank you so much. I feel so what's the word? Edified from this conversation with you. And I'm really, really, really happy that we had this discussion and we made it work. And we might have two, because we'll have to see how the sound is.
I know,
but
that's great.
I always make it work. And if you're listening to this, it means that I managed to make this episode work.
And you got the real deal.
Yeah. No retakes, no redo-overs.
That's it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate
thank you.
Thanks for allowing me to share my story.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And to everyone that's listening, I trust that you are more empowered from this conversation. And yes, I thank you. And Paul, keep doing it and keep rising and keep changing lives.
I will do that. Yep.
And to everyone listening, this is where I sadly have to say we're out. Bye-bye. There you have it. I trust that you're feeling more empowered in your skin. And as the late Dr. Maya Angelou says, when you get, you give, when you learn, you teach. So it would mean so much for us at EIMS if you share this episode and tag us, or teach an insight that you learned from today's episode on your socials and tag us. And remember to go over onto iTunes and leave us a review, or follow us on socials at Empowered in My Skin. But most importantly, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.